Here is the best crosspath for every monkey in BTD6. We'll start with the top path Dart Monkey, where the Spike-a-Pult, Juggernaut, and Ultra Jug are all best crosspaths with very quick shots, as that plus 50% attack speed adds a ton of damage. Next, we have the middle path, all of which are better with razor sharp shots, as that'll increase their pierce from 2 to 5. The only time you wouldn't do this is if you really need that extra range or camo detection from the bottom path. For the PMFC supporting Dart Monkeys, I like to make them 2/2/0s, as this extra pierce and attack speed is amazing for rounds 96 and 98. Plus, those upgrades are free if they're in range of a primary expertise. And for the bottom path, the crossbow, sharpshooter, and crossbow master are all better with very quick shots, as that extra attack speed helps all the time, whereas the extra pierce from the top path only helps in certain scenarios. Onto the boomerang monkey, and the top path is up first. Glaive Ricochet and more glaives are better with red hot rangs, as this doubles their damage and gives them lead popping power. For the Glaive Lord, both crosspaths are very close in damage output, though most players make this guy a 5/0/2 for the easy buildup from more glaives. For the middle path, it depends on what you're doing. If your boomer was one of your first monkeys and needed for the early game, it's hard to turn down the red hot rangs +1 damage early on. But once you get to a bionic boomerang and up, crosspathing them with glaives is the way to go, as it over triples their pierce, which is especially important if you're going a permacharge for the late game. Just make sure to buff it with a MIB so it can still damage leads and DDTs. And for the bottom path, it depends on what tier you plan on stopping at. If you're going all the way to a MOB domination, make this boomer a 0/2/5 for that extra attack speed, but if you're stopping at a MOB press, make it a 2/0/4 for that huge increase in pierce and extra knockback. This will help out a ton on rounds like 96 and 98, where your monkeys are almost always pierce capped. Next up is the bomb shooter, and the top path is pretty easy. Just crosspath them all with missile launcher to increase their DPS and have a higher uptime on those stuns. Onto the middle path, starting with MOB maulers. Here, the top crosspath is definitely the way to go, though spending money on more maulers is typically better than on their upgrades. Additionally, mauler strats almost always include a primary mentoring village, meaning you get tier 1 upgrades for free, and because of this, I leave my maulers as 1/3/0s. This extends to MOB assassins, but if everything is under a primary expertise village, then you should obviously pick up heavy bombs on all of them, as it'll be free. And for the tier 5 MOB eliminator, you should always make it a 2/5/0, as its main attack now does 100 damage, and that extra pierce goes a long way. For the bottom path, cluster bombs and recursive clusters are usually better when combined with heavy bombs. An argument can be made that the middle path is better when buffed by an alchemist, but that takes a good bit of planning and is really its own strategy. That being said, if you go all the way to a bomb blitz, the 0/2/5 is much better. Next up is the tack shooter. For hot shots, make it a 3/0/2, as pierce is easy to add through a village or alchemist, but more projectiles is not. For ring of fire, you can really go either way, as making it a 4/2/0 gives it plus 20 pierce and 8 range, while the bottom path increases its damage from 5 to 7. I usually make them 4/0/2s because it's the natural buildup from hot shots, but if you need that pierce for around 63, you can always plan ahead. That being said, the Infernal Ring is better as a 5/0/2, as it gives the meteor plus 300 damage, and once you buff it with an alchemist and primary expertise, the +1 pierce from the middle path is negligible. For the middle path, neither crosspath affects the maelstrom ability, so you can go either way. In the past, this was always crosspath with even faster shooting, but the nerf in 36.0 has made the decision much tighter. And for the bottom path, crosspath them all with even faster shooting, as making them shoot almost twice as fast is much better than the extra pierce and range from super range tacks. Next, we have the top path ice monkeys. Ice shards and embrittlement are both better with the middle path and can be left as 3/1/0s or 4/1/0s respectively. The only notable thing that deep freeze does for them is provide plus 10 pierce, but this isn't needed until the late game. If you go all the way to a super brittle though, that extra pierce is great, so make it a 5/2/0. For the middle path, snowstorm and absolute zero are better with cold snap, as it lets their ability affect DDTs, and this will let the tier 5 apply permafrost to MOB class balloons. If you're stopping in an arctic wind though, you can go either way. If you need that permafrost effect or help with leads, make it a 2/3/0. Otherwise, make it a 0/3/2 for an increased slow radius and the ability to permastall ceramics. Onto the bottom path, which are all better when combined with enhanced or deep freeze. If you need help with leads, getting cold snap is fine, but in general that's not what this path is used for. The 0/1/3 cryo canyon is great for stalling super ceramics. The 0/2/4 stops ceramics in their track but adds a good bit of damage on top, and the 0/2/5 icicle impale adds a ton of utility versus blimps, and all you need is a MIB for it to freeze DDTs. Next up is everyone's favorite monkey, the glue gunner, and the top path is simple. All of them are better with glue splatter as that extra pierce lets it glue everything. The middle path is almost as easy. Glue strike and glue storm are much better when crosspath with corrosive glue, as this lets their abilities affect mob class balloons. As for glue hose, corrosive glue is solid in the mid game as it lets it soak through all the balloon layers, but once super ceramics start coming on round 81, the stronger glue crosspath gains a ton of utility to help slow them down, and soaking into the weaker layers is not nearly as important at this point in the game. And for the bottom path, we just want more pierce. Make your mob glue 013s, as this is a cheap way to affect more blimps, and crosspath relentless glue and super glues with glue splatter, as this will slow everything and let their stuns go crazy. Before we move on to the military monkeys, I just want to say we are doing our first ever merch drop. So if you want a cool hoodie, a bomber jacket, or a surprisingly cool flag, you should check out hbomb.shop. Now, there are also some other items, but it goes live right now, and it should be good for about 10 days. After that, you won't be able to buy these items anymore. So if you want to support me, check out hbomb.shop and get a cool piece of clothing. On to military monkeys, we'll start with the top path sniper. Deadly precision is usually better as a 302, as that increased attack speed lets it mow down ceramics. For main mobs, you can make them 420s and fit them into almost any lineup, as their shrapnel lets them stun multiple blimps with each shot, buying you tons of time to deal with them. If you run a stalling strat though, make this guy a 402, and setting it to last will stun lock one blimp at the start of the track for a very long time, letting your abilities come off cooldown and spike piles get back up to max size. For the cripple mob, most people make it a 502 for a higher uptime on the debuff it applies. However, with enough attack speed buffs, you can make the 520 attack fast enough to also have over a 100% uptime as well. So in super late free play runs, it can be beneficial to pick up shrapnel. For the middle path, crosspath these guys with even faster firing. This extra attack speed makes them attack over twice as fast, combo better with buffs like an alchemist, and allows Geraldo to apply sharpening stone to them. Though if you don't have access to these buffs for some reason, crosspathing them with large caliber will increase the DPS more than even faster firing. And for the bottom path, it depends on what you need. If you want single target damage like in boss events, crosspath them with large caliber. But if you need help with dense packs of balloons, crosspath them with shrapnel. That being said, the middle path sniper is much better than this one at handling grouped balloons. Next up is the submarine, and the top path is a unique one. If you're only using it as a cheap early game D camo option, the submergence support can be left as a 300. If you plan on upgrading it to a reactor, a 420 is better if you need lead popping power. However, subs are very strong early game towers, so it'll usually be a 202 before you purchase the submersion reactor upgrades. Because of this, most plutonium reactors are 402s, which provide good mid-game damage and very reliable camo detection. As for the energizer, it doesn't really matter, as cooldown reductions and hero XP are the most important aspects of it, but because my reactors are usually 402s, my energizers tend to be 502s. Onto the middle path, ballistic missile is a fun one. If there is a great central spot for subs to attack in, crosspathing it with airburst darts adds quite a bit of damage, especially since barbed darts give them extra pierce. If there is not a good spot for the sub though, making it a 230 will help a ton, as it'll be able to shoot its missiles anywhere a monkey has vision. Whatever crosspath you choose can be upgraded into a first strike or preemptive strike with the same reasoning. However, if you're only using the sub for its first strike ability, leaving it as a 040 is fine and will save you some money. And for the bottom path, crosspathing it with advanced intel is almost always better. Getting a sub army with near global range is a force to be reckoned with, so make these guys 20Xs. Onto the buccaneer, and this guy is pretty simple. For the top path, crosspath all three of them with hot shot. This will add a ton of projectiles to each shot, increasing its DPS by a ton, especially when you buff them with an alchemist. The only reason to not crosspath it this way is if you can't get camo detection on it otherwise, but if you're having that issue, you have bigger problems to worry about. The same reasoning goes for the middle path. You should always be crosspathing it with double shot, as that extra attack speed and double projectiles are insane, especially on the pirate lord. And for the bottom path, you'll typically want to leave these guys uncrosspath unless you need extra popping power. Because they're used for farming, you want to save as much money as possible, leaving them as 003s or 004s. However, it is nice to pick up hotshot on a few of them to help you defend against the rounds. Next up is the monkey ace, and the top path is pretty easy, as you should be crosspathing them with sharper darts, as that +3 pierce can drastically increase their DPS. If needed, you can pick up centered path for better ace positioning and micro. The middle path is just as easy. If you have a bomber ace, you should be crosspathing it with rapid fire, as this lets it drop bombs more often. Upgrading this guy to a 140 or even a 150 050 is just fine. However, if you're only getting this guy for the ability, leaving them as a 040 or a 050 is good too. For the bottom path, all three of these guys should be crosspath with lots more darts. This will drastically increase the damage of Never Miss, Spectre, and Flying Fortress, and is much better than the camo detection crosspath. We're moving on to the heli pilot, and the top path is pretty simple. Unless you need camo detection, you should crosspath all these guys with faster firing, as this extra attack speed greatly increases its DPS. For the middle path, crosspath them all with faster firing, as this increases the blowback of the heli pilot, and this path doesn't really need quad darts or pursuit upgrades. And for the bottom path, we have our first split decision of the tower. If you're stopping at a mob shove, make it a 023, as this will increase its knockback of mob class balloons. But if you're upgrading it to a Comanche defense or Comanche commander, crosspath it with pursuit, as that'll increase the damage as well as making you not have to micro it. Next up is the mortar monkey, and the top path is kinda cool. Shell Shock, the big one, and the biggest one can all be crosspathed either way. Building them with rapid reload will make them shoot about 85% faster, making their stuns more consistent. However, crosspathing them with burning stuff will greatly increase their DPS. This increase is so great that the biggest one will one-shot fortified super ceramics and has caused the 502 crosspath to become the popular choice. For the middle path, all three upgrades are better with Bloon Buster. This extra damage plus a larger explosion radius is better than the bottom path in almost every scenario. This is because burning stuff does not receive any buffs when combined with the middle path, which I think could be a cool change in the future. And for the bottom path, we actually have some choices. For signal flare and shattering shells, crosspathing it with rapid reload is generally the way to go, as this increased attack speed will make the decamo and defortifying shells much more reliable. When going for a Bloon incineration, however, you have a choice. Crosspathing with Bloon Buster greatly increases the damage of its napalm effect, which helps out a ton with single target rounds like 97 and 100. If you don't need this damage, then making it a 025 is better, as it is much more reliable at defortifying DDTs and allows it to get 85% more walls of fire on the ground. To round out the military monkeys, we have the dartling gunner. Starting with the top path, all of these guys are better with faster barrel spin. This extra 50% attack speed provides a much larger increase in DPS than the extra pierce from powerful darts. The middle path is a weird one because the higher DPS option is not the preferred crosspath. You see, crosspathing these guys with powerful darts increases their pierce and theoretically their DPS. However, the accuracy of them is so bad that focus firing is usually the way to go, especially since the increased accuracy affects their abilities. When building them from scratch, picking up laser shot can help out a ton in the early game. However, if you have tons of money and can afford a mad straight up like in a boss battle, a 150 is just fine. And for the bottom path, all three of these guys are better when crosspathed with faster barrel spin. This extra attack speed and camo detection provide too much value to forego for increased accuracy and laser shock. To start off the magic monkeys, we have the top path wizard. Arcane Mastery and Arcane Spike are both much better when crosspath with Monkey Sense, as their magic bolts have relatively low pierce, and this helps out a ton. As for the Archmage, an argument can be made for the 520 variation, as it gets a boost of fireball and wall of fire damage, but I found that a 502 generally does more damage and is the natural progression of the top path. Onto the middle path, which depends on what map you're on. For Dragon's Breath, make this guy a 032 if you can place him in a spot with few obstacles. This is because intense magic gives extra pierce to the Dragon's Breath attack as well, increasing its DPS by a lot. If you're on a map with a ton of obstacles like Workshop, or there is a very specific spot that you want the wall of fire, then crosspath this guy as a 130, as it'll ignore obstacles and let you target where the wall of fire goes. As for tiers 4 and 5, just follow the same logic as the Dragon's Breath. And for the bottom path, crosspath all three of these guys with wall of fire. This will add a ton of early game damage, letting you save up for more powerful upgrades, and once you get this guy to a necromancer, the wall of fire will start doing more damage the more bloons are in his graveyard. And it is a great way to keep his graveyard full, as the wall of fire will be inside the graveyard's collection range. The prince takes this to another level, as his graveyard is even bigger, making for a very deadly wall of fire. Next up is the super monkey, specifically the top path. Starting with the sun avatar, you can go either way with this guy. If I'm just adding him to a random strat for some mid-game damage, I usually make him a 302, as that knockback provides a ton of utility even later on. That being said, the 320 is just as good, as it gives extra range and pierce, which can be deadly when paired with either Adora for her sun boosts or with Geraldo's pickles. If you haven't tried those combos out before, I highly recommend them. As for the Sun Temple and True Sun God, crosspath them both with epic range, as you want them attacking as much as possible. For the middle path, the Robo Monkey is better as a 230 for the extra pierce and attack speed. That being said, this crosspath doesn't have any knockback, so an argument can be made for the 032s, but I'd rather just get something something cheaper like an Arctic Wind if I need some super ceramic help. As for the Tech Terror and Anti-Bloon, crosspath them both with Plasma Blasts for the same reason. I'm sure there is a custom challenge where you need to use knockback to clump up all the bloons for an annihilation ability, but in a normal game, the extra damage from the top crosspath is much better. Onto the bottom path, all three of them are better when paired with Plasma Blasts. There are some niche scenarios where the extra range and projectile speed are needed from the middle crosspath, but in general, getting those purple batarangs is the way to go. Next up, we have the top path ninja, and this entire path is better with Seeking Shuriken. This lets the ninja maximize its pierce and helps clean up balloons that aren't even in its range. Caltrops is a nice pickup if you have the money, but it isn't always needed. For the middle path, it just depends on what you need. If you're building a ton of shinobis to buff a Grandmaster or Master Bomber, then stopping at 030s is fine. But if you need more range on them, then upgrading the shinobis to 130s is the way to go. If you're going for a Bloon Sabotage or Grand Saboteur, then you're fine leaving them uncrossed paths, as you'll typically just be using them for their abilities. And for the bottom path, all of them are better when crosspath with Ninja Discipline, as this will increase the rate of which bombs are thrown. This is why you see everyone going 104 ninjas for the first tier bosses. Additionally, Sharp Shurikens is not needed, as it doesn't affect the Sticky Bomb or Flash Bomb in any way. Onto the Alchemist, the top path is a fun one. Starting with Berserker Brew, a 320 is the better crosspath, but you can usually leave it as a 300. This buff will be plenty for the early game and let you stay flexible for future upgrades. As for Stronger Stimulant, the crosspath depends on how many monkeys you want to keep buffed. If you have one or two main monkeys that you want buffed, make the Alchemist a 420, as this makes the buff last longer and decreases the time a tower needs between brews. If you have 3 or more monkeys that'll benefit from Stronger Stim, make it a 401, as this will let it throw potions more often. And for Permabrew, make it a 500 or 501, as the buff duration is now permanent, so you just want all your monkeys to receive it. Next is the middle path Alchemist. The tier 3 unstable concoction is best made as a 031. This is because larger potions only increases the splash radius of these unstable potions and not their pierce, so faster throwing is much better. For transforming tonic, it depends on what you need. Making it a 140 increases its transformed pierce by 50%, whereas faster throwing increases its attack speed by 25%. So technically, the 140 has a higher max DPS, though I tend to make mine 041s, as attack speed is always useful while pierce is wasted a lot of the time. This logic extends to total transformation, so mine are usually 051. Side note, some good monkeys to transform are buffed Druids of Wrath or Shinobi Tactics Ninjas. For the bottom path, you'll want a crosspath lead to gold and rubber to gold with larger potions. This will increase the splash radius of the Alchemist, letting its money-making abilities affect more balloons. As for the Bloon Master Alchemist, crosspathing it really doesn't matter, but because the previous tiers are better with larger potions, BMAs are normally 105s. Next up is the top path Druid, and all three of these guys are better with Heart of Vengeance, as it provides plus 10% attack speed and extra range, letting them throw their special attacks more often. Onto the middle path, Druid of the Jungle is better as a 130, as Hard Thorns let its brambles pop leads. As for the Jungle's Bounty, this guy's better as a 140 if you're using it for defensive purposes. However, if you're using it to farm, then making it a 041 is better, as you can fit more farms in its range. And for the Spirit of the Forest, a 150 is generally preferred, as this lets all the vines on the track deal damage to lead balloons without the need of a MIB, which can be very handy against DDTs. For the bottom path, Druid of Wrath, Poplust, and Avatar of Wrath are all better when crosspathed with Thorn Swarm. This increase in projectiles drastically increases their DPS and makes them synergize better with Stronger Stimulant. Onto everyone's favorite support tower, the Banana Farm, and the entire top path is better with valuable bananas, as this makes every banana worth 25% more. For the middle path, all three tiers are better with greater production, as this makes them produce more money each round, and this only gets compounded with interest. Though, if you make it all the way to a Monkeynomics, it is fine to make it a 052, as most of the money it generates comes from its ability, and Banana Salvage makes banks collect themselves when they're full. As for the bottom path, marketplaces are better as 023s if you have the more valuable Bananas Monkey Knowledge Point, as they'll generate $16 more per round than 203s. That being said, if you're building these up slowly from scratch, like in the early stages of a boss event, it is more efficient to start with a few 200 farms and then upgrade them to marketplaces. Because of this, you'll see a lot of 203 farms being built before the first tier of a boss fight. But for Central Markets and the Monkey Wall Street, both of them are better crosspaths with valuable bananas, assuming you have the Monkey Knowledge Point. Next up is the top path Spike Factory. Starting with the Spiked Ball, you get to choose between extra attack speed and smart spikes. On easier maps with one track, the 320 is better, as it'll load the end of the track with way more spiked balls than a 302, though the longer the round goes, the better the 302 becomes as its balls last longer. The thing is that it takes about 82 seconds for the 302 to have a better defense, so unless you're stalling, not many rounds last that long, and this assumes that no spikes have been used. Where the 302 gets an edge, however, is on maps with multiple tracks, or if there's a specific spot you want the spiked balls to be placed, as the Smart Spikes upgrade gives the spactory targeting options. This same logic extends to spike mines, but super mines is a funky one. It's really only used for free play and sometimes boss events. In free play, the rounds last long enough that making it a 502 does increase the size of the spike pile by the end of the track, though if things are making it all the way to the end in free play, I don't think a super mines is gonna save you. And in boss events, balloons get empowered some way or another, making it more likely that some super mines are going to be used, so the 520 is often better in boss runs. For the middle path, it depends on what map you're on. If you're on a single lane track, then crosspath these guys with bigger stacks, and you can pick up white hot spikes if you need lead popping power. That being said, if you're on a map with multiple tracks and not all of them are active at the same time, like muddy puddles, then crosspathing them with smart spikes is the way to go, as they'll only target the active tracks. And for the bottom path, all three of these upgrades are better when crosspathed with even faster production, as this makes them synergize much better with alchemists. Next up is the top path village, and this can get kind of weird. To start, if you only have room for one village, crosspath them with radar scanner. But if you already have some form of camo detection, like a top path submarine, then you can pick up monkey commerce instead to get a nice discount on new monkeys and upgrades. Continuing with the one village situation, middle path villages are much better with jungle drums, as this attack speed buff is insane, and bigger radius makes it easier to buff all of your monkeys with the village. If you have room for two villages though, it can be very good to make one of them a 302 and the other a 032. This will save you a ton of money going forward, as well as getting the benefits from primary training as well as the Monkey Intelligence Bureau. And for the bottom path, crosspath Monkey Town, Monkey City, and Monkeyopolis with bigger radius, so it can affect more towers and make you more money. Side note, for the Monkeyopolis, the best farms to sacrifice to it are 420s, as these BRFs are the most expensive farm you can sacrifice. Onto the engineer, and the top path is an odd one because it changes as the game goes on. You see, in the early game, sprockets and sentry experts are better with pin, as they get extra pierce and can stop balloons in their tracks. But this quickly falls off when ceramics start coming, as you can't pin them, and the middle crosspath provides extra damage to mobs and fortified balloons. Because of this, sentry experts and champions are generally crosspath with deconstruction, but if you stopped at a sprockets for some reason, he'd likely be a 302. For the middle path, crosspathing doesn't matter too much, to the point where they aren't even purchased most of the time. If you have extra money though, I like to crosspath these guys with pin, as it makes cleansing foam slow down balloons by 50% for 2 seconds. Onto the bottom path, all three of these guys are generally crosspath with larger surface area. This lets the balloon trap and XXXL trap target exactly where to place the trap, maximizing how much money they can make. That being said, if you can afford a big trap straight up, it's recommended to make it a 205, as this will increase the speed at which he generates traps. This is especially useful on rounds like 98, where you'll be filling up the traps like crazy, and is helpful for grinding pops for the master builder. Finally, we have the beast master, and crosspathing does not matter on this guy. The beasts have no interactions with the other paths, so you'll typically want to ignore any path that you're not trying to merge and level up. Though it can be funny to have a ton of little beasts running around alongside a huge tier 5 beast. But those were the best crosspaths for every monkey in BTD6. If you want to see every monkey's weakness, click on this video right here. Look how cool that is. Huh? That's for the flag.